The Avatar Dining Club Mysteries by Huckleberry Hax. Episode 14. The Director's Explosion. "Everyone," I announced, "say hello to Herman Hennimore." The 6 regular members of the Avatar Dining Club took it in turns to lean forward and greet our guest, who was, as usual, hosted on the laptop at the end of the table. To my left, the young builder, Raw Concrete, raised his glass of cola in greeting. On his left, and at the opposing end of the table, our club founder and host, Edward, gave out one of his booming hellos. Continuing in this clockwise direction, there was club owner and skin designer Indigo Williams, fashion photographer and blogger Jennifer Bitt, Vanilla Sharp, previously known to us as Rainy September, and then the laptop. Finally, to my right, sat Mary Ann Middlemarch, also a fashion blogger. "Thank you, everyone," Herman said. "It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Leonard." "Herman's a virtual world movie maker," I told the group. "We all know who Herman is," Indigo informed me. "But what you don't know," I added proudly, "is that he's going to be adapting one of my novels into a machinima." "Really?" Vanilla exclaimed. "Well, you kept that one a secret." "Which one?" "The Hawk's Peak incident," I announced, and watched the faces around the table slowly turn to blank expressions. "My science fiction novel," I added. "The one set during a mission to Mars?" Frowns, shaking heads. I sighed. "You should have stuck to writing stories set in the metaverse," Raw told me. "I'll never understand why you abandoned that." "I haven't abandoned that," I exclaimed. "I just wanted to try something different." "It's always the same," the young man continued. "People can't just stick to what they're good at." "Good at?" Indigo queried. "You are most welcome, Herman," Edward said hurriedly. "I trust Leonard has briefed you well on our club rule?" Herman nodded. "He has indeed. No real-life information. I heartily approve. To be honest, I initially said no to his invitation, but when he outlined that requirement, all my concerns disappeared." "Well, now you have me curious," Indigo said, and stopped talking at the sight of Edward's sternly raised finger. "Sorry." "How goes it with the hunt for a mountaintop location, Herman?" I asked eagerly. Yes, Leonard," our guest replied. "Good news on that front. I visited a new region just yesterday that I think's going to be perfect. A quite stunning installation, beautiful views, and just the right amount of seclusion and space for that space observatory you picked out last week on our shopping trip." "You said you were going to buy a new sweater," Vanilla exclaimed, giving me an accusing glare. "You never said anything about picking up a space observatory." "I did get a new sweater," I protested. "The space observatory was sort of an impulse buy. They had it on special offer, and I needed one anyway. Oh, and I also bought a flock of migrating geese. I thought they might look good over our new house." "I love metaverse shopping," Jennifer said happily. "Is anyone else cuting out over Vanilla and Leonard living together now?" Indigo asked, grinning from ear to ear. But Vanilla threw her hands up in despair. "Leonard, we have too much stuff already. You're breaking the region with all the high-poly junk you keep bringing home. Last night, most of the living room furniture refused to res, and the roses in the front garden looked like concrete origami. The day before that, the bathtub was just a set of 4 claw feet on the floor, and the day before that, half the walls of the house were missing." I shook my head defiantly. As I keep telling you, that's nothing to do with me. We're well within our prim limit. The landowner just needs to do a regen restart. If the worst thing he wants to install at your house is a flock of migrating geese, then you're doing pretty well, Indigo commented. Anyway, I've spoken with the mountain region owner, Herman continued, and she's more than happy for us to place the observatory there, provided it's not for more than an hour or so at a time. But that's fine. So long as I note down the coordinates, I'll be able to place it in the exact same position each time we shoot there. To avoid continuity errors, I explained to everyone, proud to be able to demonstrate my new filming knowledge. Is that the new place everyone's been photographing lately? Jennifer asked, with all the low-hanging cloud. I did a photo shoot there a few days ago with a new ski suit that's just been released. But isn't there a lodge on the mountaintop? There is indeed, Herman replied. A very large one. So how will that fit in with your secluded space observatory? Oh, that's no problem at all, he said. I'll simply de-render it. A couple of clicks and it'll be gone. Gone on my screen, at least. Which is, after all, where the camera is, I added, knowingly. Enrico, our impeccable waiter, arrived with the main course, wisely placing the various salad and pasta dishes first, before bringing Raw his pizza, so that everyone else had a head start on him. The young builder's scowl at this order of presentation quickly disappeared as he launched his surprise assault on the large chicken and pepperoni carnivore put in front of him. Presently, Edward waved his finger at the laptop screen. Hennimore, he said thoughtfully. Now I remember. Didn't you film a production of a well-known Scottish play I was in a few years back? Ah, yes, Herman replied. The live performance. Yes, that was me. My gosh, that was a challenge. Really? Edward seemed surprised. I must say you came across as a very calm, collected, and in-control fellow at the time. That was because I'm very good at knowing when to turn off my microphone so people don't hear me swearing, Herman laughed. Well, until recently, that is. The problem with that production was that it was live. I'm used to taking as much time as I need to compose shots and plan the movements I want in them before filming. Plus, I'll then reshoot the same scene from one or two different angles before moving on. But when you're filming a live show, you have no time to think or frame at all. In the end, I must have attended at least 10 different performances of that production before I had all of the footage I needed. And editing down from all of that was a nightmare. We were sold out for 4 consecutive weeks, Edward said to us proudly. I played the title role. What a fine time that was. 28 evenings of saying the same lines over and over in front of the laptop in my study, and I could have said them for 28 evenings more and not felt even remotely tired of them. He raised his arm dramatically. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Wow, whispered Indigo, her eyes slightly wet. We all broke out into applause. Actually, a few of the diners on the surrounding tables joined in with us. Our white-haired host smiled and thanked us humbly. So who's that by? Asked Raw. For the second time that evening, Edward had to silence Indigo with a raised finger. He explained it patiently to the young builder. Meanwhile, Vanilla said to Herman, You mentioned you were good at knowing when to turn off your microphone until recently. What happened? Our guest, who was taking a bite out of a piece of garlic bread, reddened slightly. He took a moment to compose himself. It was just a couple of weeks ago, he said finally. I suppose you could say that I committed the voice equivalent of a fatal crosspost. Uh-oh, commented Jennifer. Herman nodded solemnly. I was certain I'd just turned the microphone off, but it transpired that it hadn't been on in the first place. So when I clicked the mic icon, it in fact switched from off to on, and then I said some very unkind things about the region owner, which I thought only I could hear. Instead, everyone heard them. Ouch, said Indigo, and I'm guessing the region owner was present at the time. You guessed correctly, he confirmed, reddening again at the memory. Involuntarily, we all winced at the thought of it. So you were filming when you had your outburst? I asked him. Yes, in a stunning urban build that I've used a couple of times before. A beautiful fusion of architectural styles, old and new, so detailed. The most recent film I used it for was about a year ago, that historical drama that you liked, Leonard. He sighed. Well, now it's a place I'll never be allowed to film in again. Ah, I said. So that's why you need a few extra weeks before starting on Hawk's Peak. Indeed, Herman replied. I have to find a new location. It's not just the scenes I hadn't yet filmed there that I have to shoot in it. I now have to reshoot in the new location all the scenes I filmed at the old one before. To avoid continuity errors, Indigo explained to me. And it's not just a question of simply finding a place and then getting on with it. There's all the actors to assemble once more, several of them, all from different time zones across the planet. And 2 of the scenes I shot there had a whole bunch of extras moving about in the background as well. Never mind the technical challenges of filming, the sheer logistics of setting up a scene can be a nightmare all by itself. Herman sighed once more. Me and my big mouth. Edward said, Don't be too hard on yourself, dear fellow. I must say I've seen my fair share of directorial outbursts in the various real-life productions I've taken part in. It seems to be a trait that goes with the role. I suppose a key advantage to being a director of metaverse films must be that, ordinarily, you get to hide all your own personal explosions. As you say, Edward, Herman replied. Ordinarily. Why do directors need to have explosions anyway? Mary Ann asked. There's no real excuse for it at all, Herman replied. But if I absolutely had to give a reason, then I'd say it has to be about control over one's creation. When Leonard here is writing a novel, everything that happens is up to him. He doesn't have to rely upon anyone else at all. A director, on the other hand, has many different people to coordinate. Actors, stagehands, musicians, publicity. Any one of those people can cause the whole project to go off in a different direction from the vision you have in your head. And in your case, it would appear, region owners, Indigo said. Oh, metaverse filming adds plenty of people to that list, Herman replied, a note of exasperation creeping into his voice. Region owners, sure, the biggest issue being them closing their place down before you finish filming there. Entirely their right, he added hurriedly. I don't want to sound ungrateful for being allowed to use their locations. That wasn't my issue with Stella, by the way. But then there's also region users, crawling all over the place, and don't even get me started on role players. I dated a paragraph role player once, Indigo said. It took him 3 hours just to unbutton his shirt. I spent most of the time browsing on eBay. So, what was it the region owner did that cheesed you off? Vanilla asked. Stella, said Herman. Well, it wasn't so much what she did as what she didn't do. Her region badly needed a restart. You know how it is with the metaverse. All those scripts and avatar attachments and excessively detailed textures take their toll on the servers running Sims. Stuff starts to break after a while. Animation servers stop working. Lag builds up. More importantly, just as you experienced, Vanilla, objects sometimes just fail to appear. I'd asked her time and time again to do it, and each time I got there to film, it was no different. I really needed to do a few wide-angle shots that took in the whole town, a slow pan across the rooftops, a rising crane up from the streets, that sort of thing. But it was impossible with half the buildings gone. What was infuriating about the whole thing, he continued energetically, was that she kept telling me that she had done a restart, an out-and-out lie. I actually think she set the whole thing up just to annoy me. It's the only explanation that makes sense. Why would she want to annoy you? Raw asked, scooping up his final slice of pizza. I did a double take at his now empty plate. This was fast, even for him. Opposite, Indigo was staring at the builder as though she was in a hypnotic trance, a look of faint horror on her face. I'm pretty sure she's fed up with me filming there, our guest replied. In fairness, I suppose it is a bit of an imposition. If it was just a one-off shoot, then that would be one thing, but when you're returning over and over and resing your own props and scenery items there as well, which might ruin the look of the place from their perspective, then it's another thing entirely. Of course, the first time I asked her, a couple of years back, she was delighted. I don't think she fully realised what saying yes entailed, though. The second time I asked her, I noted that her agreement was noticeably less enthusiastic. Maybe she was just having a bad day, Jennifer suggested. It was pointedly less enthusiastic, Herman insisted. I remember it quite clearly. The first time she said yes, it was with an exclamation point and a smiley face. The second time, she just said, sure. No exclamation point and no smiley. Ouch, Vanilla remarked. That's a remarkable memory you have for conversation, Jennifer commented. I, might have recently checked my chat logs on that point, Herman replied. He coughed. Indigo tore her gaze from Raw to send a look of perplexion in Herman's direction. I don't understand. If she didn't want you to film there anymore, then why didn't she just say that? Maybe you should ask her, Herman snapped. How should I know? Maybe she didn't want to come off looking like the bad guy. Maybe she was worried I'd complain about her in public, which, FYI, I never would have. I've no idea. Not everyone is quite so direct as you are, Indigo, I pointed out, and added hurriedly, in your uniquely delightful manner, which I personally find very refreshing and value enormously. Case in point, Vanilla said, smirking. So you're saying she deliberately maintained her sim in a state of poor repair in order that you become frustrated and throw a tantrum so that she'd then have a morally defensible excuse for banning you? Indigo sat back, folded her arms and shook her head. Nope, I don't buy it. I've known people do worse stuff than that out of spite, Mary Ann commented. Oh, spite I have no problem with. Spite I am fully familiar with and embrace with all my heart. What I don't believe is that she thought it all through like that in advance. You're joining up dots to make a picture that doesn't exist. How could she have known that you'd have an outburst? Edward just remarked that you typically come across as calm and collected. I'm not saying she masterminded it all like some nefarious scheme, Herman replied. I'm just saying that she was probably irritated by me and, yes, didn't do the restart out of spite. Then, when my tantrum happened, she saw it as a golden opportunity. By the way, some people seem to like poking calm and collected people. That last part is certainly true, I mused. I've been told my own calm and collectedness in-world comes off as aloof and insincere. All those profile comments people post about hating drama, and when someone actually does try to raise themselves above all the petty squabbles, they get branded as cold and uncaring. Exactly, Herman said. Well, I think you're just projecting annoyance onto her out of your own sense of guilt at imposing on sim owners, Indigo said. There are probably loads of reasons why she never got around to doing the restart. It would probably have been a huge inconvenience to her. For example, there might have been people looking around the place that she didn't want to kick out when she found she had the time to do it. Then why not simply say that? Herman asked. Why pretend that she'd done it? Because that's the sort of excuse people give the first time they're asked but are embarrassed to give the second or third time. Simple. She was probably fully expecting to do the restart in her own good time and just wanted you off her back on the issue. "What sort of stuff were you rezzing there?" Raw asked absently, whilst he eyed up the desserts menu. "Maybe you took her close to her prim limit so she couldn't place anything herself whilst your stuff was there. That would have annoyed me for sure." "Oh, I came nowhere near that," Herman replied. "I always check that sort of thing. My impact wasn't actually that much at all. Just a few bits and pieces here and there. Well, that and the movement markers." "Movement markers?" Jennifer inquired. I leaned forwards to explain this point in a knowledgeable manner, but Herman beat me to it. "I use them when I'm filming a busy scene where there's more than one person moving around," he said. "Like a street scene, for example, where there's other folk walking up and down in the background. They're part of a special system I use to coordinate and synchronize them." "What's to coordinate if they're just walking around?" Raw asked. "Oh gosh, if I left it to people to just walk however they wanted, it would be a nightmare," Herman laughed. "They'd be starting at different moments, bumping into each other, walking into walls and vehicles. It's a lot harder to walk in a straight line in the metaverse than people think it is. So I use different marker routes for different avatars, and each person sits on their designated starting point, and then all I have to do is click a button for everyone to begin walking their route according to the markers I've laid out along it." "So how many markers had you laid out?" Jennifer asked him. "Well, now let's see." Herman paused to do some mental calculation. "Probably around 300? 300? Raw blurted, sufficiently astonished that he actually stopped looking at the menu. "And you wonder why she's annoyed at you? What did these things look like?" "But they only take up one prim each, and Stella still had over 2,000 prims free," Herman protested. "The starting points are little orange cubes, and the movement markers are little triangles pointing in the direction of travel, a different colour for each route. But once I've arranged them how I want, I click another button to make every last one of them invisible. What's more, they're automatically phantom. Any avatar who unknowingly walks into one will pass straight through it without ever knowing there was something there. I'm not saying you're wrong, Raw, but she had no rational reason to be angry at me for that. Even if they had been inconveniencing her, then she could at any time have just auto-returned the whole lot to me at her own click of a button." "Well, I'm saying Raw's wrong," Indigo said, "though there's nothing especially new about me saying that. If all these gizmos were invisible and massless, and if they didn't take her anywhere near her prim limit, then to all extents and purposes they weren't there. What's to get annoyed about?" "Except," said Raw, suddenly excited, "they were still there. They were there so far as the region was concerned. I bet each one of those 300 objects had its own script running in it, and scripts are notorious for creating lag. 300 scripts all running simultaneously. Yes, there's your lag source. It had nothing to do with Stella not doing a restart. In fact, she was probably telling you the truth when she said she had done one. It was your own system that was causing your problems." "Please don't do your victory dance," Indigo said to him, but I could tell she was actually quite impressed this time at the young builder's hypothesis. All around the table there were thoughtful nods of acknowledgement at this idea. Except from Herman. "I'm sorry to burst your bubble," he said, "but the system just doesn't work like that. Movement markers aren't scripted at all. The only things scripted are the starting points, which physically move along the route, taking their avatar with them. And, at most, there was only 9 or 10 of those. The markers are identified by the starting points according to their name and orientation. They're, effectively, passive signposts." "Right," said Raw, deflated. Yeah, that would do it." "But, like I said, none of this logic means that she couldn't have been irrationally annoyed by the stuff I put down." "Maybe she just didn't like knowing that stuff was there," commented Vanilla, gazing levelly at me as she said it. "Fine," I said. "I won't res the geese." She grinned at me sweetly, with a mixture of affection and triumph. I still say you're inventing secret annoyance on her part as a way of justifying your frustration and outburst to yourself, Indigo stated resolutely. You feel bad about it, which is good, but leave it at that. Stop trying to conjure up some backstory to reduce your feelings of guilt over behaving badly. I'm telling you, Herman said stubbornly, she resented me being there. I could just feel it. And I'm telling you that you're probably imagining that. Edward broke the slightly awkward silence which ensued by clearing his throat. Perhaps I might be of service here, dear fellow, he said to Herman tentatively. I can't help but wonder if young Raw might have been right in thinking it possible that Stella did, in fact, do the restart after all. No, it's not possible, Edward, Herman said flatly, now looking distinctly unimpressed by the whole experience of being a guest at our table. I realised some post-meeting soothing was likely to be necessary if my filming project was going to proceed. Half the buildings in that sim were missing. Every time. If she'd carried out a region restart, then they'd have been there. I have of course experienced exactly the phenomenon you're describing on several occasions, our white-haired host continued, unbothered by the denial. But, as Vanilla was saying earlier, when that happens it usually seems to be different things that are missing each time you enter the broken region. I'm wondering if, in your case, it was the same buildings that were absent every time? Herman thought about it. Well, it's not like I did any sort of audit, he said after a moment. I never was especially good at recognising things that are missing. But now that you mention it, yes, I think it was the same stuff that was gone each time. But so what? You said to Leonard that one of the projects you filmed previously in this particular place was a historical drama. Yes. But you also mentioned that the region is a fusion of architectural styles, so presumably that includes modern buildings too, which wouldn't have been consistent with your historical setting? Well, of course, Herman said impatiently, but that's simple. It's just like the Mountain Lodge. I took care of those buildings by de-rendering them. He stopped talking. And then he said, Oh. Indigo snorted. You de-rendered them permanently and forgot to undo it. Oh, well done, Edward. Well done indeed. Oh dear, Herman said. In my experience, Edward said to him kindly, people usually respond well to an apology when it's sincerely made. Perhaps you should go and make one to Stella when our meal is over. Who knows, Leonard, he added to me. Maybe your movie will start filming on schedule after all. The Avatar Dining Club Mysteries was written and read by Huckleberry Hax. Music was by David H. Dean. For more of Huck's work, visit huckleberryhax.wordpress.com.